This is huge for the Phoenix Suns as the team has created some flexibility as they head into the upcoming NBA season. GM's James Jones making the move to waive two players, Nasir Little and EJ Liddell, and clearing up a roster spot to allow the team to make some additional moves later in the season. We're going to break down what this means and what some of the options are for the Phoenix Suns right here on Suns Digest. My name is CJ Pierre. Thanks for joining us, you guys. It has been an interesting offseason. The Suns adding some free agents, losing some guys that were a part of the rotation last year. So it is going to be somewhat of a new look squad rolling out there with the big three of Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Bradley Beal. But the Suns have made themselves a little bit more flexible. And we're going to get into that right here on this episode. So strap in. We've got a good one for you. Before we get into the details, we noticed that about 82% of you guys are watching our videos, and we appreciate that. But you haven't subscribed to the channel just yet. If you want to make sure you're keeping up to date with all the latest Suns news and updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss what we're going to have for you guys. Now, let's get into this. As the Phoenix Suns open up a roster spot with the moves that they recently made after waiving two players under contract. Now, we had talked about the fact that there were 16 active players on the roster for quite some time after the signing of Tyus Jones and the trade for EJ Liddell. And we wondered, what was going to happen. There had been reports out that the Suns were expected to waive EJ Liddell, but that hadn't happened for a while. We speculated, like, hey, what's taking so long? We thought it might just come with the Tyus Jones news, but it didn't happen right away. But James Jones, he was, doing what he had to do, trying to see what options he had available to him before he had to make that decision, which they would have had to make at the end of the month, particularly on Nasir Little and EJ Liddell's contracts in particular. But James Jones deciding to make the move, and they did waive both Nasir Little and EJ Liddell. Now, we had talked about Nasir Little and his place on this team. The fact that we really didn't see him having a lot of options for playing time. He had been someone who had been in trade conversation, potentially, particularly leading up to the 2024 NBA draft, that he might be a part of some package deal to acquire some talent or some draft capital. But the Suns eventually ended up moving him. It doesn't look like they were able to find a trade partner to take on his contract. Now, Nasir Little was set to make $6 million this year. He also has an additional 3 years on his contract. I'm sorry, an additional 2 years on his contract, 3 years including this upcoming year. And they just were not able to find a team that was willing to take that. The Suns are going to extend the payments throughout the rest of his contract, so he'll only count against about 3 million against the cap over the next few seasons for the Phoenix Suns. But he's going to get his money, and he is going to look for to continue his NBA career elsewhere. It's kind of expected. He didn't really have a place on this team. There was no real spot for him in the rotation, particularly when you talk about the young guys that they added with Ryan Dunn and also Iguodaro, plus the re-signing of Josh Okogie and extending him. It just didn't seem like Mr. Little had a spot in this rotation at $6+ million as a cap hit. You don't really want a $6 million cap hit just sitting on your bench. It's not really good contract management, especially when you're up against the cap and in the second apron like the Suns are. Moving on, EJ Liddell, that was also a move that was more so expected. He was a part of the trade that saw David Roddy get moved and EJ Liddell brought in. He kind of was always expected to be cap casualty, roster casualty, even though he's a young player and he's got some talent. The Suns are kind of more so in win now mode and looking to develop the young talent that they currently have on the roster. As I mentioned, Dunn and Iguodaro in that department. EJ Liddell not necessarily fitting in to what Mike Budenholzer is going to want on the court and in his rotation. And then particularly with GM James Jones looking at, developing players, just didn't seem like he was going to kind of fit in there. So when you take those two moves out, the Suns now have 17 players signed to their roster, 14 on the active roster, 3 signed to two-way deals. Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, all making over $49 million this season. The big three, Yusuf Nurkic, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal, all three expected to factor in to the upcoming rotation. Then there's Josh Okogie, who signed to an extension that he was able to do. The Suns able to re-sign him after he opted out in of his player option, re-signed to a longer term deal, got him some more money as well. Ryan Dunn, first round pick that the Suns got in the draft. Mason Plumlee, who signed to a veteran minimum. Tyus Jones, who signed to a veteran minimum, who was expected to start. The Suns kind of got late in the game, really hadn't even had conversations with him in summer league because they didn't expect him to be available. He is your new starting point guard. Damian Lee, similar to Josh Okogie, opted out of a player option, signed an extension with the Suns. Monte Morris on a veteran minimum. Bol re-signed with the team. Also Iguodala, the team's second round pick. And then the three two-way players, Jalen Bridges, Colin Gillespie, and Ty Ty Washington Jr. More on those guys later, but that is the Suns' active roster, and there is a spot open. The Suns giving themselves flexibility moving forward into the upcoming season. They have multiple options that they're going to be able to do moving forward. Now, again, they're still a second apron team, so you have to, they're still going to be working in the margins in terms of what happens, but they do have options, and we're going to break down those options right here on Sunside, just starting with option one. They can sign another free agent. Now, the NBA free agency this year has been very unusual. There were a lot of guys who were really talented who expected to probably make some big money and sign those long-term deals, like Tyus Jones, for example, that just remained unsigned for a long, long time. And because of the CBA, so many teams above the salary cap not wanting to do more to get into the first apron or find themselves in the second apron and lose that flexibility, they ended up just saying, "Hey, we're just gonna have to roll with what we've got." And it just really hurt some of these, higher profile free agents like Tyus Jones, like Spencer Dinwiddie, for example, guys who would maybe hope to have been in that group of free agents that signed to some longer term deals, but that didn't happen. Now, some of these guys may end up remaining unsigned into training camp through preseason and probably into the season. But there is a list of some available guys that I just wanted to look at that the Suns may also have an option of bringing in on a veteran minimum. Now, Gordon Hayward is an interesting one for me. Obviously, we know that he has a long injury history. If you remember that really gruesome injury he suffered when he was with the Boston Celtics, but Gordon Hayward still is a capable player, a veteran player, and capable of putting the ball in the hole and could be a microwave scorer, particularly if you're looking at someone coming off your bench. Right now, the Suns' bench rotation is going to probably look somewhere in the neighborhood of Monte Morris, probably Royce O'Neal, Mason Plumlee, maybe, one of the rookies, Ryan Dunn, also Iguodala. But Gordon Hayward could slide into somewhere of a scorer aspect that could come off the bench if they sign him to a veteran minimum deal. Obviously, Grayson Allen's probably going to be your primary scorer coming off the bench, given what I'm expecting the rotation to be. But I think Gordon Hayward is an interesting one to look at. Evan Fournier, kind of in a similar boat. Markelle Fultz was probably more of someone who they maybe wanted to add before they added Monte Morris. Doug McDermott, another similar, really, really good shooter. And if the Suns find themselves in a situation where they are going to need some more offensive firepower, that is someone that they would want to look at. There's also Robert Covington. Many people in the NBA circles know Landry Shamet, who previously was with the Suns. I don't know if Suns fans are really looking forward to possibly bringing him back. Taylor Horton Tucker is a young player with some promise. C.D. Osman, who's had some standout moments with the teams that he's been on when he was with the Cleveland Cavaliers and San Antonio Spurs, and Isaac Okoro, defensive wing player, has struggled shooting at times, but is a good slasher and can be an offensive threat, particularly in the paint. But again, these are just some available guys that the Suns may look into. Obviously, that could change over the course of the season. The Suns wouldn't be in a position to really be buyout candidates or candidates to be in the buyout market because of being in the second apron. So they would really have to more so be on the lookout for guys who are available in free agency. Then there's guys who have signed in free agency that are not available for trades particularly, and that's the other thing that we're going to talk about is they can trade for multiple players. This, I believe, is more of a break glass in case of emergency situation. If all of a sudden you're going through the course of the season, things are not working out um, in the way that you can. I'm going to kind of maybe get it on a little soapbox, if you will. This is probably the more likely option if someone gets hurt, knock on wood, we don't want that to happen. But if someone gets hurt or someone is lost for an extended period of time, that's when the maybe trade someone like Yusuf Nurkic for multiple players kind of comes into play, and then they try and create some changes to kind of fill those holes, if you will, in that department. If, like, let's say Bradley Beal or Kevin Durant misses an extended period of time, again, knock on wood, I do not want that to happen. But that's the only realistic situation where I could see them using someone to trade for multiple players, and it would have to be one of these players that is makes some significant money, like a Grayson Allen, like a Yusuf Nurkic. I don't think Josh Okogie is someone who would demand multiple players back if they needed. I don't think that Royce O'Neal is someone that would demand multiple players back. It would have to kind of be one of those, like I said, break glass in case of emergency things. And the other thing is if the season's not working out as we thought and the Suns end up becoming sellers at the trade deadline, then that's a situation where having that open roster spot, if they end up trading KD, God forbid, and they trade him away and they acquire multiple players back. That would kind of be a situation where that open roster spot will come into play. But trading for multiple players is an option. I don't love it as an option, but we have to recognize that it is there. The last option that I would definitely want to talk about, which intrigues me the most out of the options that the Suns have, is signing a two-way guy, signing one of their three two-way players to an active roster contract. Now, that is something that sometimes teams use, depending on maybe a player that flashes in the G League and performs well and exceeds expectations. They may sign them to a longer-term deal. Normally, that happens later in the year when they have, kind of close to maybe if they've used up majority of their time on the two-way contracts. You can only be up with the NBA roster when you're on a two-way deal for a certain number of days. And then after that, you're not able to, because of your contract, you're not eligible to be up with the active roster. So, if we take a look at the two-way guys, I believe that they all have a chance, depending on what happens during their time with the team, that they could be called up to the big leagues and open up a spot on the two-way contract roster, which, a lot of teams like having an open two-way contract because there's a lot of guys who will get signed to, 10-day deals and other guys who are on two ways that maybe teams necessarily don't have as much faith or confidence in. And two-way contracts get moved around. Other guys may get signed. So there's a lot of movement that can happen in that department. But let's take a look at the Suns guys. Let's start with Colin Gillespie. He's probably the most likely candidate out of these three that I think could find himself on the active roster sooner rather than later. I think he has a lot of promise. The fact that he was not a part of the Suns Summer League this year tells me a lot about what this team actually thinks about him. Despite the fact that he's only on a two-way contract, I think he has a load of opportunity to find himself with the team on the active roster, especially if there's some kind of injury to either Tyus Jones or Monte Morris and they need a point guard to be in the rotation. We know Mike Budenholzer loves his point guards. That is a spot where Colin Gillespie could shine and find himself a spot on this roster. Next person I want to look at is Jalen Bridges, the undrafted uh, free agent rookie that the Suns picked up following the 2024 NBA draft, who flashed in Summer League. He has a lot of talent, and I think he actually could be a fixture on this Suns team in the future. But from what I saw in Summer League, Jalen Bridges actually has a lot more in his bag than I had originally thought. He's got a little handle. He's got a jumper. He's got a nice form and stroke. I think he's going to be able to develop into a consistent shooter in the NBA. I think he's going to be one of these stars on the Valley Suns this year in the G League. I think he is going to be one of the guys who creates some highlights, creates some buzz. He's active defensively, he's active offensively. He's going to kind of really have his hands in everything. I have high hopes for Jalen Bridges moving forward, and he could find himself, depending on what happens, injuries or whatnot, could find himself on the active roster. And then lastly, there is Ty Washington. He's kind of been moving around, spent last year in the Milwaukee Bucks organization, didn't play a lot, with the team, played mostly in their G League. He had been with the Houston Rockets. Ty is an interesting one. I think he is probably more so likely to just remain on the two-way contract this year. He's actually someone who, for all intents and purposes, depending on what happens, depending other guys who may have some two-way contract possibilities. He's someone that and may end up getting cut actually at some point this season. I think he has some talent. I think he has some promise. But and he did develop into a better shooter during his time with the Milwaukee Bucks organization. But just given the actual depth on this roster, I think he's probably going to be the odd man looking out. Looking in when it comes to the odd man out is the analogy I was looking for. Found it. But Ty Washington, I don't see necessarily being one that gets signed. I think it would probably be either Colin Gillespie, who may earn his way onto the roster, or Jalen Bridges, who may get called up because there may be injuries. We have to look at the reality. The NBA is a physical sport, and guys aren't going to play all games. There's going to be guys that get hurt. Hopefully, not anything too serious. But I feel like the Suns have made the moves necessary to acquire the depth necessary that if there is an injury that is maybe a couple of weeks, maybe a month, they should be able to sustain it and continue this push as a win now team. So the Suns have options. They open a roster spot by getting rid of Nasir Little and EJ Liddell, so they have some flexibility moving forward. They have options. They can sign another free agent to a veteran minimum. They could trade for multiple players now that there's a spot open on the roster. And then if they really need to, or if they really feel like it's deserved, they can call up one of these two-way guys. But that's all I've got for you guys on this episode of Suns Digest. If you want to make sure you're keeping up to date with all the latest Suns news and updates, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a thing that we're going to have cooking for you guys. We're going to have so much more as the Suns get into training camp and into the preseason. I can't wait to start breaking all that down with my buddy Bruce right here on this show. We appreciate all the love and support. Let us know what you guys think in the comments, any other topics you guys want us to discuss, and we will get into those ideas. Again, I want to thank you guys again for checking out this video. We will catch you next time, and go Phoenix Suns.